So a few months ago, I released a video ranking all of Kanye West's albums, and it's my best performing video by far, so I'm inclined to believe that you guys would be up for some more videos similar to it. In that video, I named off a few artists that I'd be up for talking about, and those were Kendrick Lamar, Death Grips, Kid Cudi, Phoebe Bridgers, J. Cole, and Tyler, the Creator. At the time, it was mostly between Kendrick and Cudi, and I even started listening to the Kid Cudi albums that I needed to hear in preparation for making a video on him, but then out of nowhere, I got in an extreme Tyler, the Creator mood. As of making the Kanye video, I had only heard Goblin, Igor, and Call Me If You Get Lost, but over the past 2 months, I've been listening and re-listening to all of his albums in the hope of bringing together the best ranking of his albums that I could. I think I've done that, so without further ado, let's get into the ranking.
I'm a fucking walking paradox. No, I'm not. Threesomes with a fucking triceratops. Repped hard, rapping as I'm mocking deaf rock stars, wearing synthetic wigs made of Anwars, dreadlock.
I kind of go back and forth on whether Goblin is a 3 or a 4 out of 10, but either way, it's bad, and it's Tyler's worst by a long shot. I went into Goblin only knowing Yonkers, a song that I really love, so I had some pretty high hopes for it. The album starts out pretty good with a string of 4 solid songs to start. Goblin is a really captivating and effective opener. Like I said, Yonkers is great and probably the best song here. Radicals isn't my favorite, but it's decent enough. And then She with Frank Ocean is really great. Then a couple songs later we get Tron Cat, which, like Radicals, isn't my favorite, but it's solid enough. Everything else here is obnoxious, annoying, and unnecessary. This thing has 15 songs on it, not counting Deluxe, and so there's a problem when I only actually like 5 of them. Most of the time, Tyler's trying to put on this character that just doesn't work for me here. He's ultra edgy and offensive, and it just feels like he's trying to get a rise out of as many people as he possibly can. While he's doing that, he's acting like he doesn't care about what anyone says, while responding to critics in ways that says the exact opposite. This is also the worst that his production has ever been. The thing that mostly kills it for me here are the synths. Just like Tyler, they're very annoying and obnoxious, and most of the time, it feels like the songs would be infinitely better off without them. There are examples of the production being great, like on Goblin, Yonkers, and She, but for the most part it's just annoying. Something that kind of bugs me about all of Tyler's early work is that he tries to bring in his Odd Future friends for most of the features, but the talent gap is just massive between the best and the worst of the group. Tyler, Frank Ocean, and Earl Sweatshirt, who isn't actually on this album, are clearly the best here, and from time to time Haji and Damo Genesis have some pretty great performances, but most of the other members are just honestly not that talented, so they really tend to drag down songs whenever Tyler throws like 5 of them on one. I appreciate the attempt he makes to do something slightly conceptual here. Now, this isn't really a concept album, and it's much less conceptual than many of the albums he would make in the future, but there's a bit of a storyline that weaves throughout these songs, and I appreciate the effort to do something a bit more than what's expected. So yeah, Goblin's not very good. I think that most of the songs here are very annoying and obnoxious, both lyrically and sonically, and it's extremely bloated. But I will say that I can see some ideas here that would get expanded on in his next album, Wolf. There were some decent ideas here and there, it just doesn't really come together for me in the end.
This is what the devil plays before he goes to sleep. Some food for thought, this food for death. Go ahead and fucking eat. My father's dead, why I don't know. We'll never fucking meet.
I don't really have much to say about this one, since it's basically just Goblin with more competent production. Those annoying synths are nowhere to be found here, and that genuinely makes most of the songs better than the ones on Goblin. I do want to say that I know that this is technically a mixtape, but Tyler considers it his first album, so I will too. But yeah, the same criticisms apply to both this and Goblin. The lyrics being quite annoying and obnoxious, and the Odd Future talent gap being the big two. I love the intro here, even though it's extremely similar to the intro on Goblin. I really love both of these intros just because I think they really give an interesting perspective into his mind, and where he was at the time of making these albums. But yeah, I love the intro, I love 7, and I love the track with Earl Sweatshirt, but outside of those, I think most of the songs are either bad or forgettable, and I don't really have much to say outside of that. It's better than Goblin, but that doesn't really make it all that great.
I'm going harder than coming out the closet to conservative Crystal Palace when it's a lot of steak on the inside. But let's be honest, I'm really morphing. Name my album Cherry Bomb because Grady hit sounded boring.
I feel like Cherry Bomb is the most popular pick for Tyler's worst album, and I feel like that's pretty unfair. This isn't great, and it's stupid and inconsistent, but it's miles better than Goblin. Cherry Bomb is weird because I feel like there are usually 2 types of songs here. There's the very distorted and heavy songs like Death Camp, Cherry Bomb, and Smuckers to an extent, and then you have the very calm, smooth songs that are foreshadowing what he would do on Flower Boy and Igor with songs like Effin' Young / Perfect, Find Your Wings, and Two-Seater. It's a really interesting mix that clashes pretty hard, but leads to some pretty great stuff. I think this album has a very distinct sound to it, and it stands out a lot in his discography, even if it always isn't for the right reasons. On the distorted, heavy side, I think that the best songs are the ones that are intense and heavy, without being too much of a mess. Songs like Death Camp Smuckers and Buffalo, though Buffalo is admittedly a little bit of a mess, really hit the mark for me. They're not too much, and they're not so much of a mess to the point where I can't understand what's happening. On the flip side, you have Pilot, Run, and Cherry Bomb, which are all unenjoyable messes. Cherry Bomb especially is almost unlistenable for most of it until the last bit comes in and saves it just a little bit. I also don't really like Keep Those, but I don't really know where to mention it since it doesn't really fit into either of these two categories. Then you have the smooth, calmer songs, and I feel like pretty much all of them work for me. Find Your Wings is great, Two-Seater is just a little too long, but it's still really good, and Effing Young / Perfect is similar to Yonkers for me. I love it a ton, and it's probably the best on the album, but it's not really one that I would consider for his best, like, of all time. It's up there, but it just doesn't get all the way there. This is one of the only Tyler albums where I don't really feel like there's much in terms of a concept or storyline to hold together the song. There's obviously the theme of finding yourself and who you're meant to be, but it doesn't go much further than that. In the second half, there's this talk about him and this girl going to a triple feature at a movie theater, but it doesn't really go anywhere. So yeah, while Cherry Bomb isn't the greatest album since the days of sound like Tyler declares on Smuckers, it is definitely overhated and has some seriously great qualities. It could be better, but it's a big step up from his first two albums. Now I know that most people have Call Me If You Get Lost in the top 3, and I want to have it there, so if it makes you feel any better, it's essentially tied for third. Call Me If You Get Lost is basically just Tyler taking a victory lap. Almost all of this album is just Tyler flexing, but it's extremely well deserved since he released two of the most critically acclaimed hip-hop albums of the decade and won a Grammy for one of them. That isn't to say that there isn't any depth to this album though. Massa, Sweet, I Thought You Wanted to Dance, and Wilshire are moments that go a little deeper than some of the other songs, and they're pretty great because of that. That isn't me dissing the rest of the album, I just like that he did include moments like these to break up the pure flexing of the rest of the album. Speaking of the pure flexing, it's pulled off incredibly here. It never gets annoying for a couple of reasons. The first, which I've already mentioned, is that it's incredibly deserved. The second is that it all just sounds excellent.
Yo, what it is that nigga teeth skin look colored in, right?
This is some of his best production that he's ever had, and listening to this album after listening to his early stuff really shows his insane growth over the years. It's also really nice to hear him rapping like this after releasing Igor, which isn't really a rap album. Songs like Corso, Lumberjack, which is my most listened to song on the album, and How Wind Blows show that even though he took a few years off from rapping like this, he's just as skilled as ever. Something that was super nice to hear was the pure quality of the features. There are a few Tyler albums that have really fantastic features, but this has got to be the best that they've ever been. Youngboy, Lil Wayne, Pharrell, and Lil Uzi all give insanely great performances on the songs they're on, and Tyler even brings in Damo Genesis for a song that kind of calls back to the Odd Future Wolf days, and he gives an incredible performance on it. This is the first album so far that I can actually say has like one or two songs that are legitimately in contention for my favorite Tyler song of all time. I think that Sweet, I Thought You Wanted to Dance is the best song here, and the I Thought You Wanted to Dance section is probably the best thing that Tyler has ever made. That's the song that played a minute ago when introducing this album, so if you've never heard it before and that interests you, then you need to go listen to it right now. Now that's not me talking down on Sweet, because that's also excellent, but I Thought You Wanted to Dance is on a whole other level. So yeah, Call Me If You Get Lost is excellent, and is probably my second favorite album of the decade so far behind Phoebe Bridgers' Punisher. It's truly excellent, and like I said earlier, it's basically tied for third. I don't really have a reason why this is a 9 out of 10, but it's just this weird feeling I have. It just doesn't feel like a 10 to me, so it's not. That may not make sense to anyone but me, but that's just how I feel, I guess.
Why y'all so salty? Hot tamale is on. A can of things that I'm on. Your boy is bad to the bone.
I was honestly not really expecting to like Wolf all that much going into it. It's his third album, and I wasn't really expecting anything too great coming off of his first two. I mean, I didn't really like Goblin, and I knew that this was like the same era, and it was coming off of it, so you can see why I didn't think it'd be anything too special. But it turns out that I was shockingly wrong, and Wolf is actually incredible. Wolf is easily his most ambitious and conceptual album pre-Flower Boy, and I think that that's why it's pretty much on the same level as Call Me If You Get Lost. While this does have a miss or two in the track list, the ideas and the ambition completely make up for them in my mind. There are a couple songs that stray from the storyline a bit, but for the most part, Tyler's pretty good at sticking to the concept. Tyler has a few albums where a ton of songs really stand out for me for their excellent storytelling, and Wolf is definitely one of them. Answer, 48, Party Isn't Over / Campfire / Beamer, Pigs, and Lone are all great examples of that. The ultimate example, however, is Colossus. This is another song that is up there for his best in my opinion. Colossus is basically Tyler's version of Stand from Eminem, but it definitely does enough different to separate itself from it. They're really only the same in concept. In Colossus, there's a human interaction element that makes it really engaging. Sure, it doesn't go as far with it as Stand does, but I think it's just as interesting and engaging. With all that being said, it's not just serious storytelling songs over all of this. You have Tamale, which is one of the most delightfully weird Tyler songs from this era. You have Jumbo with a pretty great feature from Haji. Damo 23, which was the lead single for the album, and Rusty with great features from Donald Genesis and especially Earl Sweatshirt. Something that I really appreciate about Wolf is that it takes the really annoying, obnoxious, and offensive lyrics from his first two albums and actually uses them in pretty great ways to portray a certain character. He also actually knows when to lay off it and get more serious and personal, which I don't think is something he did very much in his first two albums. So yeah, Wolf is way better than I thought it'd be. It's a pretty well executed concept album, and it shows a lot of growth from Goblin. This is also where he started to plant the seeds for what he'd do later on in his career, and it's really interesting to listen back on now. Igor is a very special album, but if you made it this far in the video, then you're probably aware of that. I can't really say much about this album that hasn't already been said, but I'll try my best to make my thoughts somewhat interesting. This is his most critically and commercially successful album so far for a reason, so let me explain why I love it so much. This is definitely the Tyler album that goes the furthest with the concept it's going for. He never really breaks character here, and each track is an essential part of the storyline, which I think is a big reason why this is such an impactful listen. For those who don't know, this album basically tells the story of a really messy love triangle, and Tyler's perspective on all of it. This isn't a super unique story, and it isn't the first or last time Tyler would touch on this subject, but it's by far the most well executed and fleshed out. It's super hard for me to pick a favorite from here, so I'm just going to run through a few of the best songs and why I like them so much. New Magic Wand is actually Tyler's favorite song he's ever made, and it's way up there for me. This feels like the big turning point in the album where you really start to feel some of the darkness come out, and it's one of the most interesting points on the album because of that. It also might have the best beat on the album, and is certainly one of the most hard-hitting. Gone Gone Thank You is one of his best multi-part songs that he does on every album, and is another one of my favorites from him, period. It just feels like a very freeing part of the album that's happy, but it also has something kind of sad going on underneath it all. There's another serious turning point in the storyline, and it's seriously fantastic. A Boy Is a Gun is another excellent one. It's extremely Kanye influenced, which I obviously loved hearing. It actually samples the same song as Bound 2 from Yeezus, and this video is a mashup of the original sample Bound 2 and A Boy Is a Gun that shows that off really well.
Honey. All them other niggas lame and you know it now. When a real nigga hold you down, you supposed to drown. Bam. You so motherfucking dangerous. You so motherfucking dangerous. You got me by my neck. That's why these other niggas lame to us. Cause all these other niggas lame as fuck. We show them no respect.
I'll leave this in the description, and I highly recommend you check it out because it's a pretty interesting listen. And then I guess I'll talk about Are We Still Friends, which is a very interesting place to leave the album off on. You can feel him start to kind of take back what he said on some of the previous songs like Gone Gone Thank You. He's saying that he doesn't actually want nothing to do with the person he's talking about, and the song kind of implies that this album is just an endless loop type of thing, because after a while, the main character is just going to be right back to where he started at the beginning of the album. I think it's a really creative way to end an album like this, and I'm glad he went for this type of ending. I've also decided after hearing this and I Know the End by Phoebe Bridgers that more albums need to end in an extremely cathartic and aggressive scream. Even for the worst songs on this album, I would still consider them to be top-tier Tyler songs. Puppet is a great and very important moment of the album that sees the return of Kanye West as a feature, which is always fun to see. And I Don't Love You Anymore is just kind of him continuing what he was saying on Gone Gone Thank You, and it contrasts really well with Are We Still Friends. So yeah, Igor is an excellent album that I don't have any real problems with. It's the most well thought out album we've talked about in the video so far, and really shows that Tyler isn't afraid to completely change and evolve from album to album if he thinks that it would result in a better project.
okay, dookie. My infatuation, it translating to another form of what you call it.
So now we arrive at my number one pick, and I don't think that this is a very controversial pick, I don't think. Like, I know Igor is the one most people put at number one, but I'm pretty sure that this is also a pretty accepted pick. I think that Flower Boy is Tyler's most personal album yet, and it really hits all the right buttons for me as a result of that. I'm going to tackle this in the same way I did Igor by starting out with some more general thoughts and then breaking down some of my favorite songs on the album. I think that Flower Boy is right there with Call Me If You Get Lost for the album that shows the most growth in Tyler's music. It was really insane listening to Wolf and Cherry Bomb, and then hearing how he perfected the sounds from those albums on Flower Boy. He has a couple of hard hitters here that feel like they're kind of drawing from Wolf, but a lot of this album feels like extremely expanded upon version of the more slow and smooth sections from Cherry Bomb, which I already enjoyed. The production here is just on another level and really complements what Tyler's saying very well. Speaking of that, let's talk about what this album is actually about. When listening through it, I couldn't really pinpoint a consistent storyline or anything, but I got the idea that this entire album and all of these feelings that he has throughout of it takes place while he's on a drive. There's lots of little bits thrown in that point towards that, so I don't think I'm an idiot on that one. A lot of this album touches on isolation and loneliness, and you really get the feeling that Tyler was pouring his heart out on a couple of these songs. He also touches on his sexuality in a couple different spots in the album, and those songs feel just as personal as the others. I feel like that was made into a much bigger deal than it had to be when it came out, and it's crazy to me that there are people to this day who think Tyler was just trolling on this extremely personal and introspective album. But yeah, let's get into some of the songs that are on here. Much like Earthquake, I can totally see why See You Again is the second most popular song, but unlike Earthquake, it's actually one of my favorites. When the song came on, I really knew that I was in for a special ride, and I think that it has some of Tyler's best singing to date. It's super catchy, especially when the beat comes in and he gives that quick little verse, and Kali Uchis sounds extremely good on it. Who Dat Boy is a really fun song with A$AP Rocky and Tyler going back and forth with some fantastic chemistry. This is one of the only hard-hitting songs on the album, and I'm really glad it's here. It feels very grimy and aggressive, but I still think that it fits into the album quite well. Garden Shed is one of the most interesting songs that Tyler's ever made, both lyrically and instrumentally. This thing is extremely unpredictable and engaging, and Tyler's verse that he gives at the end of it hits extremely hard. 911/Mr. Lonely is another great two-part song that dives more heavily into the themes of loneliness and isolation. November is maybe the most personal and vulnerable song here, and might be the most impactful moment on the album for me because of that. I also think that Enjoy Right Now Today is an interesting way to end the album. I like the idea of just having a pure instrumental at the end to convey all of the emotions and wrap everything up. So yeah, Flower Boy really hit for me, and even though I do have a lot of love for Igor, it's easily my favorite album from Tyler. So yeah, that's my ranking of Tyler the Creator's albums. I had a really great time listening through his discography and making this video, so hopefully you guys enjoyed watching it. Let me know your ranking for Tyler in the comments below. I really loved seeing people throw down their rankings on the Kanye video, and there were some good conversations to be had because of that. Next month you can expect a Kendrick Lamar ranking since this man finally announced his new album. I didn't really want to do a discography ranking just a month after another one, but I was already too deep in this video to quit making it, and there's no chance that I wasn't going to be talking about Kendrick next month. After Kendrick, I would love to do Phoebe Bridgers or Kid Cudi. I'm just waiting for them to drop some new stuff before I do. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video, so thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.